Hi, welcome. Today we have something a little different. It's not specifically Halloween related, but it's kind of related to the Haunted Mansion. So I figured, hey, I'll throw this out here and see if people are interested in it and see where it goes. If you've been following along, a lot of you haven't, you've followed from my initial video. You know my background. I'm a computer scientist. I just enjoy Halloween. I do props and setting up for the Halloween haunt and all those things. And then we built this vlog around that idea. And I also enjoy the Haunted Mansion and Disney. But being a computer scientist and a software engineer by trade, one of the things that's very popular and very much in the news nowadays is the ChatGPT AI interface that's been released to the public that a lot of people have been talking about, and there's a lot of debate about whether it's good, it's bad, how it will affect education and jobs in the future, and a whole bunch of different things. So I took a look at it from my own point of view, just to see what it was about and see how it worked and see what it could really do. I also have heard that it can write code as well as doing some of the other things that it does as far as writing papers and having conversations and doing the interactive things that it does, language based. So I logged onto it and wasn't really sure what I was going to do or how I was going to interact with it. I tried a few different things, but the thought of it writing code came to mind, and I thought, what could I get it to do maybe that would be reasonable or some kind of something that it could maybe accomplish. So for whatever reason, again, I love Haunted Mansion and stuff, so that came to mind. And for whatever reason, I thought of adventure games from the 80s. You're not familiar with this, I suggest you can check it out, look it up, Google it, it's out there. One of the early computer games, or a whole actually genre of computer games that really started the computer game industry, was called like text-based adventure games, where it would say things like, you're in a dark room, you see a door to the west, there's a large axe on the floor or whatever, some objects and stuff like that, and you can get the axe, or you can go west, or open door, or climb tree, whatever, stuff like that. You gave it simple commands and you would do things, and you'd have puzzles to solve and go through the games. And I was really a big fan of those back in the 80s, and one of the real forefathers and really developers of this was a guy named Scott Adams. He had a whole company that he developed around his games called Scott Adams Adventures that they came to be known as. So anyway, I asked it if it could write a computer-based game in the Scott Adams Adventure style, based on the Haunted Mansion, and it did. It said yes, it could do it, and it gave me a fairly impressive description. Here's the question I asked it. I said, write an adventure game in the style of Scott Adams Adventures with a theme similar to Disney World's Haunted Mansion attraction. And you can see here it gave me a fairly detailed answer going through what a game might be like. Obviously showing that it understood, if you say that it understands, but that it recognized what the Haunted Mansion was. He understood what I meant by Scott Adams games, because it gives commands and details that would be applicable to those types of games. And yeah, I looked at this and I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. It came up with this. So obviously my next question was, okay, that's great. Can you write the code for this? I said, in JavaScript. And it said, yes, I can. And it provided code example. It says, and it gave me this code here. And again, I was pretty impressed. I'm like, wow, that's pretty detailed. That's pretty, it's real code, it's not a complete program, obviously, but, there's some real stuff in here, and it not just wrote code, but it actually came up with a structure to it, of having rooms here, an array of objects and items, again, and characters, all arrays of objects, and then having, a player here with his current room and inventory, and then functions to, perform various tasks that the game would need to do. I did say that. Thank you. That is impressive. It was interesting that I felt the need to, to say thank you to it and compliment it kind of like that. So that was kind of weird, and I guess surprised me a little bit, as if I was talking to a person, you know. So I was impressed by that, and then I asked it to write the full game. And again, it says sure, but now here's where things started to go downhill, I guess, a little bit. So it gave me code again, but really didn't look any different from what it gave me before. So I said, okay, I said, that's good. And I said, but and again, I still did, that seems like the same sample. Can you provide the whole thing? And then it says, certainly. Here's a complete working program. Again, it looks pretty similar. Doesn't look like it really changed much. So again, I did see, like, here it did add, I guess it did add this like read line that here before, like that was not here before. So it did add like that. So now it's like getting some input or something, but I still don't really see where it's actually planned to read the input. So then I started asking different kind of questions, and I started to interrogate it to a degree to say, okay, well, how would the input be parsed in this example? It's not here. So then it does, again, it responds as if, like you're talking to a developer that knows what it's talking about. And, it talks about using readline in the Node.js module. And then again, it creates some interface here. So it just give me some code to actually get some input. So I'm like, okay, and then again, it gives some understanding of it here and the description of what it's trying to do. So then I started asking more, what about the objects? They're not using the code. And then it started to, what became a pattern here is it started to apologize. and when I kind of, caught it like doing things, and it's, apologies for the oversight, and then it goes on and gives some more code. But again, it's not really changing a lot. It does add here, now it starts to add some kind of parsing to where it's actually going to look at the input and split it up and then go and take and look. So again, it's pretty impressive, that it's doing all this. But now I also notice here, see, now it started to change things. Now it changed how it set up the rooms, changed how it didn't even have the objects. Yeah, here's the objects, and the objects also, yeah. Characters, I don't know if it has characters, if I see the characters, but anyway, I noticed that started to become a pattern, that it would change what it did. So then I started to really like, okay, I'm going to take this code and start plugging it in and see if we can actually make something to run from this. So again, I had to, tell it, make a compliment here and tell it we're making good progress, and so what about more detailed room descriptions, and then it did that too, which was also impressive. So you can see, you're in a library, room smells of musty old books, there's rows of bookshelves on the walls, so it gave, it started to give more detailed descriptions and, some fairly good stuff. Now I started to ask it, well, okay, can we have some puzzles? And, for part of the game with the objects and the characters, how would, start to get into the details of how the game might actually work. And then it did give me a list of puzzles here. And again, this kind of stuff, it seemed to do really well. And it was pretty impressive, really. Started coming up with puzzles. And again, it mentions like the ghost host, which is something from the Haunted Mansion. So again, it's recognizing, the source and the Haunted Mansion itself, and particular things or characters or rooms or different things that might be, part of the Haunted Mansion. And I really liked some of the things it came up with. I think great ideas. And again, I had to compliment it. And I was at that point had to stop to do work. I didn't want to lose it though, so I wasn't sure how this worked. Could I save the chat, and would it remember what I did? And I found that is the case. You can go back to your chat, I guess, read and update itself on the chat and keep up with what's going on. Then I started to ask it, how would we win the game? You got to have more, and it gave me more puzzles here about different things you could do. And again, pretty detailed. It's not writing code at this point. It's giving me, ideas, but they're pretty good. It was pretty impressive. That stuff really is pretty impressive, I have to say. So then I started actually writing code here and putting the code together. And when I did that, obviously there's gaps and things are missing. And again, when you start to get it into the code, that's when it starts to show its weakness, in my opinion. Because then, I would get errors and stuff, and then I would try to ask it to debug it or tell me, well, this doesn't seem to be working, and it would give me kind of some strange answers, or go back and reference parts of code or functions that weren't there. So then I wanted to, I said, well, how can I share the code with it? I wanted to see the code, so it can see what I've done and look at it then, and make suggestions, or do whatever it's going to do. So I did wind up setting up a GitHub repository for it. And again, if you're not familiar with that, that's kind of like an online place where you can programming, not even just programming, but any kind of like a sharing type of site, or project based, where you have multiple people. You could look at it, update tasks, and update the code and stuff like that. So I set it up there, and I gave it the link here, so it could go and look at the code. So it did that, and then it started to give me suggestions. It said it would find some issues. Now, of course, it's finding issues with code that it actually wrote, and saying, well, you did this wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, you did it, But I didn't tell it that. So it's telling me to fix this, you can do this and that. And again, I don't want to, I guess, bore everybody with all the details of how we went through code, line by line or whatever. But I started, then but at this point, I was trying to get it to write the code more, which I realized was kind of a failed attempt here, not going to be a fruitful task, because it does seem like that's not its forte, I guess we'll say. It can definitely write code, and it definitely did, but I think the way it'll work best is if you give it a small defined task and say, can you do this or that, or look at something very specific, then maybe it would be more able to do it. But you definitely need to know what you're doing on your own and be able to write the code yourself, and then just ask it, maybe to do one specific task, or to fix one specific thing. Like that might be more successful. But I did notice again, I kept changing the definitions and functions and what it called things. So we kind of went through this back and forth. Like here again, I say your code references describe room function, but there's no definition for that. And again, it apologizes. I may have inadvertently left out the describe room. Okay, so then it gives me a describe room, which actually it did have something similar, but then it called it something else before. But then again, it keeps changing how the rooms work. So then you have to redo the functions. My analysis was that you can't just let it go on its own, because it's just going to keep, like, it's never going to do it. It's never going to be successful, because it's going to keep changing stuff and redoing it and keep screwing itself up, basically. So I realized that I couldn't keep letting it do stuff like that. I had to just do what I wanted, and then if you wanted to ask it stuff, just do it on a specific tasks or specific details that you wanted it to look at or change. Or so again, and it responds as if you're talking to a person, because it gives you things like it's great and glad to hear that and all these kind of things. And again, it analyzes the things and does seem to be able to do that pretty well, and did give me some interesting ideas. But again, I kept getting failures and stuff when I tried to run it as the ChatGPT gave me the code, And again, it kept apologizing for its mistakes, and again keeps finding ways that this variable is an object and not an array. Again, it was like, well, you made the objects and then you change them, or you change how you handle them, or So I realized that this was a bad path to go down, because it was just going to keep going round and round in circles like this, making changes that screwed something up, and then changing something again. So eventually, anyway, I just took the code as it was and updated it myself, and stopped trying to get it to update and modify the code, and kind of just worked on it on my own. Eventually, in the initial stages, it was kind of more just a console-based game. And I was having trouble with doing that to get it to get the input to work properly and all. And I thought it would probably be better to switch to something that ran in a browser. And then so I asked it to do that. It's changing code. Sorry about that. So here's where I asked it to maybe do it as a simple web browser-based application. And then it did that, and again, this part, did pretty well. It set up a basic page with text boxes for the output, for the text to display, and where the input would come from. So then, taking that, I put that in a new application, a new project, got that working basically. Again, here it is, it's talking about process command, and I don't see that in the code. Well, you're right. I apologize for the confusion. The process command function is not explicitly called. Again, it's like everyone starts off with, I apologize for the confusion. Now it's talking about an init function, which again didn't exist. So then eventually, like I said, I got the code working on my own. I really stopped going back and forth with it, trying to get it to get the code working on its own, because I realized that wasn't going to work. So I did that. I kind of worked on it a little bit on my own, and then I uploaded it again to the GitHub repository and had to check it out. And again, I asked it to look at it, and so it did. And I asked it what improvements it would make or suggest at this point. And again, it gave me some interesting suggestions. It says it might be worth thinking about making additional rooms and puzzles, which of course I planned, because the initial design, or the initial demo basically was just 3 rooms, a couple of objects. You could go back and forth. You could pick up the objects. By the time I got it working, of course, but that was about it. So obviously, the more I got into it, the more I thought, okay, well, you could add more rooms. You have to set up stuff. Obviously, you got to make puzzles, and you got to add more objects. And what about these ghost characters? How are you going to interact with them? Of course, once you start down a path like this, one thing leads to another. So it wanted to add more rooms and puzzles. It also suggested sound effects or animation. Another thing to consider implementing a save load feature, which is also an excellent idea that we haven't gotten to yet. But again, it's showing a lot of insight into these details. So then I made some changes on my own, and again, I don't know how much of this. Going long on this video here. It's been on this a while already, so this is probably, again, if a lot of people are interested in this, and I get some positive feedback, we can keep going on this. So I'll probably end this video here. But now that I'm interested in this, and so I'm going to try to continue making this game and developing it, and it's a lot of fun. So, and I'm going back and forth, and I feel like I'm co-authoring it with this AI. So that's really kind of an interesting experience. And I'm going to keep going back and forth with the AI. Again, asking it questions. I realize obviously you can't ask it to write a full game or do anything like that. It's just not possible, at least at this stage of this AI. Anyway, who knows? In version 2, 3, 5, 10, who knows? Maybe it will be doing that, all that on its own. But for right now, that it obviously can't do that. But it can suggest, great ideas. It can develop some, pieces of code. So I'm going to use it that way and see if we can, continue to move forward and make this actually, a playable game. It'd be fun to see, and just see where it goes. And again, if I get a lot of feedback and positive views and comments and stuff on these videos, and I'll keep making vlogs about it as we go, and it's be something new to add to the channel. So yeah, that's it. And again, like it, please comment if you think this is interesting. If you want me to talk about other aspects of how we're doing this, or take this in a different direction, let me know. And otherwise, I will see you later.